underestimate the level of control the mind can have over the body. To the extent where, in modern science, they were saying for a very long time that there are certain specific functions of the body which are involuntary, meaning they're automatic, they're beyond your control. And there have been certain recent findings where it's not the case. There are actually certain processes of the body which previously thought involuntary can become voluntary. So this was discovered. They did an experiment with a certain yogi. His name was Swami Ramatirtha. And he took part in what's called the Voluntary Controls Project. It was a project which was happening in an institute called the Menninger Institute. And the whole idea of this experiment was to see how certain processes of the body which we previously thought were involuntary can become voluntary through concentration, through the influence of the mind. So he simply stunned doctors. For example, the very beating of your heart. You usually think the beating of the heart is totally beyond your control, but he demonstrated that not only could he slow down the beating of his heart, he actually stopped his heart beating for 17 seconds. 17 seconds at one whole stretch, the heart had come to a stop. And this was just a total stunning, it stunned the scientists absolutely, because they never thought that such a thing would ever be possible.
So he can accelerate if he wants, he can slow it down or stop it if he wants.
Yeah, there's really the thing is, very few people even scratch a small percentage of the capabilities of what it means to be human. Not just the body, also at the level of the mind. And based on observing, like psychologists and scientists, based on observing the limitations of certain people, they're making conclusions about the whole of what it means to be human. For example, like psychologists, they never studied yogis. They never studied the sages or the Buddhas of the East. If they did, their whole idea of what is possible in a human being would have been warped tremendously. Even to the point where, in yoga we've always known, even to the point where you can decide your own death. Just literally, you can decide your own death. You decide a time, you decide a place, and just as if you're going on a vacation, your consciousness simply leaves the body. You can leave the body consciously. So, if you come to that point, then life or death can become a conscious decision for you. At any time you want, you snip the cord. These dimensions have rarely ever been explored. Only in the last 100 years, so many things which were not considered scientific became considered scientific. Like just something as simple as hypnosis. There was a time when hypnosis was not considered scientific. They were thinking that, okay, this is some kind of superstitious nonsense, it's just all play of the mind over the body, and the person is just imagining it. But once hypnosis was repeated in laboratory experiments all over the world, and they showed that through hypnosis you can cure so many ailments. You can cure skin diseases. Now in Europe there are some doctors who are they're teaching their patients how to self-anesthetize themselves. Without taking anesthesia, they'll just learn a certain process of hypnosis. They'll bring the whole body to a certain numbness through a certain hypnotic process. And they'll go through the whole operation without taking anesthesia. All these dimensions are possible in a human being. To me, they're not really important. They're only important to the extent that we realize that there's so many depths beyond depths beyond depths which have been left unexplored about who we are. Personally, I don't see what's so fantastic about learning how to, let's say, some yogis in India, they can stand on one leg for 10, 20, 30 years. I don't see what's practical value this has for anybody. What benefit is this giving to the society? A guy's learning how to stand on his leg. Great. What insight does he have? There was one Christian mystic. He stood on top of a pole for almost his whole life. And he used to do everything from there. He used to shit from there, he used to piss from there, he used to eat from there. And his whole life he was standing just on the edge, on the top of a pole. And just for that act alone, he was considered such a wise man, such a sage. Kings came to greet him and give him offerings. But what insight did this guy have? Just to stand on top of a pole What does that mean? That the person has come to penetrating insight into existence? Does that mean that he has become so deeply aware of himself? Does that mean that he has become liberated from his own suffering? Does that mean that he has gone through this transformation from unconsciousness to consciousness, that he's become a truly conscious being? It doesn't mean anything. It's just a certain training that you can do. Anybody who goes through enough training can do such things. But that doesn't mean you've come to any striking insight which transforms the very way that you perceive life. Because after all, unless that happens, what's the point? You may be able to do all these feats and things which other people will see as a miracle, but if you're still suffering, what's the point? After all, the only thing any human being is truly seeking in life is just his happiness. Like we talked many times before. Somebody wants to go enter into paradise. Why? Because he thinks that's going to be the source of his happiness. Somebody wants to earn $1 million. Why? Because he thinks that's going to be the source of his happiness. And even a serial murderer who's going around killing people in the society, he's not doing that because of this idea that he wants to create more misery for himself. So essentially, at the end of the day, none of these capabilities mean anything. In yoga, these capabilities of the mind, they're called siddhis. And siddhi literally means an accomplishment. A certain accomplishment that you attain with the body or the mind. Certain abilities which already exist within you, just they're in a dormant state. They've not been awakened. Like your muscles. You can develop a muscle, right? Similarly, these are like the muscles of your mind. You can strengthen them to the point where you can do certain things which other people consider a miracle. But it's not really a miracle. It's just scientific. The only thing is that our ideas of what's a miracle and what's not a miracle, whatever moved beyond our present level of understanding can be seen as a miracle. So, suppose thousands of years ago you could tell somebody that, okay, or I tell him that I just have one small box in my hand, I talk in the box, somebody else who has the same box can be on another side of the planet and they can hear each other. He'll think, my God, are you a prophet? Are you divinely inspired by God? Are you a miracle worker? Well, it's not really a miracle. To me, nothing is truly miraculous. It's just that whatever is outside of our present knowledge, our present understanding, appears to be a miracle. That's one way to look at it. Or, everything's a miracle.